There was an injury that appeared to be major at the time involving the WWF's hottest star, Steve Austin, which wound up with Austin hospitalized after his arms and legs went numb in the middle of his match with Owen Hart, where he was scheduled to win the IC title. The two did an impromptu and totally unconvincing finish. After Austin feared his neck was broken and was paralyzed from the waist down for several seconds and whispered to Hart that he couldn't move after taking a tombstone pile driver with his head too low. Hart stalled for as long as he could, trying to get a USA chant going to chant in Canada, and with major concern all over his face, tried to stall, waiting for Austin to recover. Austin managed to roll toward him using almost only his stomach muscles and got his arms up for a weak schoolboy finish, ending the match some 6 to 8 minutes early. Apparently, the original finish was for Austin to win using his stone cold stunner. The weak finish was explained on television as Hart having sympathy for a beaten opponent. And that's why he was stalling so long after Austin was obviously injured. Austin could barely get up after the match, limped with his left leg dangling out of the ring, where he almost collapsed after getting backstage and was rushed to the emergency room at Meadowlands Hospital, where he was released at about 1 a.m., having apparently suffered a stinger in his neck, an injury more common in football. Austin had been having some legitimate neck problems earlier in the week, stemming from the constant aggravation his neck has taken from wrestling. Austin appeared at Raw the next night, but clearly wasn't walking well, with his activity limited to doing an interview and interfering in the Dude Love versus Owen Hart main event by hitting Hart with a Slammy Award, leading to Love's victory. We haven't heard any long-term prognosis when it comes to Austin, other than we're told that it's possible he could be back in action this coming weekend. But the most likely situation is he'll be out for a few weeks. The original plan for the Raw main event was for Shawn Michaels to solidify his heel turn by costing Austin and Love the tag team titles, which would revert back to Owen and Davey Boy Smith. Instead, Michaels solidified his turn by doing a total heel interview. And there was the main event, where Michaels began the heel turn by accidentally hitting Undertaker with a chair as Bret Hart ducked, leading to Hart capturing the WWF title for a record-tying 5th time. Hulk Hogan was the only other wrestler in WWF history with 5 title reigns. Neither Hogan nor the 5th time tying the record were mentioned in the commentary or storyline leading up to the match or after the match for the obvious political reasons, although Jim Ross did mention at one point during the show that the first WWF show at the Meadowlands was in 1981, headlined by Bruno Sammartino versus George Steele, which for history buffs was at the time billed as Sammartino's retirement match. And there was the crowd, 213 strong, 17 out of 3 and 61, paying $523,154, along with a whopping $225,100 in merchandise sales, selling out about 1 week in advance. The show broke pro wrestling records in all 3 categories at the former Meadowlands Arena, with the previous record set at the August 28, 1989 Summerslam event of 17,202, paying $326,658 for a show headlined by Hulk Hogan and Brutus, Beefcake versus Zeus and Randy Savage. The gate will be the 2nd largest of 1997 in North America, trailing only WrestleMania in Chicago. But overall, despite the WWF riding a major wave of momentum from the US versus Canada angle storm, the show generally had to be considered a disappointment. The WWF's top talent and the promotion itself, Austin, Hart, and Undertaker, showed without question they were over by selling out 1 week in advance and with the generally strong house show business of late. But the crowd response from the sellout was disappointing, particularly from a live perspective. Aside from a few carefully choreographed spots during the show and the last few minutes of the Undertaker-Bret title change, there was no real heat in the building, which made the show seem unimpressive to the television viewers who were comparing it with the current industry standards, let alone the spectacular response at the recent Calgary PPV show 4 weeks earlier and some of the recent Raw tapings. Some there live credited the dead crowd to the idea so many had been at the afternoon tailgate party and boozed it up heavily, and by the time the show started, they were all tapped out. There were reports of numerous fans who, by midway in the show, appeared to be on the verge of falling asleep because of too much partying in the hot sun before the show. Even discounting the lack of crowd reaction, the match quality wasn't good. There were far too many botched up spots and messed up finishes for a major league show. Owen Hart and Austin were on the way to doing the show stealer of a match before the injury cut them short and left the match flat. But they were the only ones who were working a great match. Brett and Undertaker, while not a bad match, was a very long match that was largely identical with all their previous matches until the finish, and was certainly nothing out of the ordinary. While the storyline built well, for match quality, this would have been middle of the road quality match at most of the recent PPV shows. Mankind versus Hunter, Hurst, Helmsley had a few spectacular spots, but overall never got serious momentum. The cage prevented the outside the ring spots that are usually the highlight when Mankind has a great match. But the cage didn't prevent the outside interference, which was overdone to the point of silliness when it comes to the whole gimmick of a cage match. China is the only thing in Helmsley's repertoire that the crowd seems to care about. So her constant interference is something of an easy out. None of the other 4 matches were any good, and about the only moment from any of them, the slightest bit memorable, would have been Ken Shamrock bleeding from the mouth, doing his caged lion routine, and he lost it and took it out on executives and former wrestling stars Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe, and 2 referees en route to having his name chanted after a match, which had to be classified as disappointing. Except for the main event, most of the finishes came off somewhat botched. China did a run in one spot early in the cage match, then had to go out of the cage and do the exact same thing for the real finish. Goldust and Brian Pillman messed up their finishing sunset flip spot to the point of almost complete embarrassment. Shamrock versus British Bulldog was technically a DQ finish for Shamrock, hitting Bulldog with a dog food can, cheap on its own, but so poorly explained after the fact that virtually everyone at home assumed it was an equally flat, double count-out finish to end what was only a fair match. The only thing positive to say about the Los Boricuas versus DOA finish was that at least there was one, and it came about 2 minutes too late. And Owen Hart and Austin's finish, which was just a matter of one of those nightmarish moments, a momentary panic due to fear of a catastrophic injury with 20,000 people's eyes glued to them. While Austin's injury was the major one, a second apparent injury took place involving Ahmed Johnson. Johnson, recovering from recent arthroscopic knee surgery, had just gotten word earlier in the week that his recovery was behind schedule. He had been scheduled to return to the ring this coming weekend, but word late in the week was he wouldn't be able to return until early September, and like Mark Marrow, would be forced to wear a heavy knee brace. After the spot leading to the finish of the 8-man match, where Johnson was supposed to give Chains, Brian Lee, a Pearl River plunge on the floor, Johnson seemed to change his mind on the move in midair, and it came off more like a power bomb and apparently re-aggravated the knee. They did put him in the ring at Raw the next night to do an angle where the Nadi turned on him to explain his longer absence and give him an issue to return for. Although even before the Nod attack, it was clear in the ring that his knee was gone. With him limited by injury and Chains limited by lack of ability, it gave the two the additional opportunity to try to set new standards for the category of awful pro wrestling. No word on when he'll return, but his first major match had been scheduled against Undertaker on the 9/20 one-night-only England PPV show. Undertaker also screwed up his back, taking a superplex off the top rope from Hart, although he wasn't expected to miss any time from it.